we are joined now by Mike Gallagher. He is head of defense at Palantir. He's got a really interesting piece in the Wall Street Journal. Time for accountability on the COVID lab leak cover-up. Mike, appreciate you making the time for us.
It's an honor to be with you.
Let's just jump into it. You got into this in your piece. What does accountability look like? What does the public need to know? What steps have to be taken now when it comes to the lab leak cover-up? I love that there's a picture of Fauci touching a little fake virus in your op-ed. He's the absolute worst. What needs to happen?
Well, I can't claim credit for the artwork that comes with these op-eds. I just do the words, but it was quite nice. To me, it just starts with the basic step of complete declassification of relevant intelligence. If you remember, we actually passed a law when I was in Congress requiring that the Biden administration do just that, but they didn't comply with the law. When they finally did an investigation into the origins of COVID, it was not serious. What came out was heavily redacted. It was a regurgitation of the prevailing consensus. And so there's been no accountability for our own scientific establishment, which was profoundly corrupted. Our own intelligence community was parroting the corrupted consensus of the scientists, and even the authors of the Proximal Origins article, which spread a lot of this misinformation, have not been held accountable. The opposite has happened. They continue to get awards. Fauci continues to be lauded, and we have centers named after Fauci. And without that basic step of accountability, people just aren't going to trust the government. They're not going to trust the health institutions, the scientific institutions, and therefore we're less prepared to prevent a future pandemic. So I think accountability starts with getting the information out there, even if it's super embarrassing, to the government agencies that allow taxpayer dollars to be funneled through corrupt nonprofits like the EcoHealth Alliance and wind their way into the hands of the Wuhan Institute of Virology. There's been no accountability thus far.
That's why I read your piece, and I appreciate you coming on with us. I know how busy you are in your new job, and we'll talk about that maybe in a moment. But Trump, for people who do not know, I encourage you to go to covid.gov today and look at everything that's being laid out there. We're 5 years after COVID, and Buck and I focus on this a lot because we're kind of history nerds, and one of the good things about time passing is over time, history, I like to think, becomes more honest about what really transpired. Are you optimistic that 20, 40 years from now, we'll get a more honest version of what happened and the failures of this nation when it comes to responding to COVID in generations ahead? Or do you think the same people that are trying to stop us now will continue to fight for generations into the future to avoid acknowledging how wrong they were?
Well, I would only say I don't think we have 20, let alone 40 years, right? We had a report a few months ago that in February, researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology had experimented with a new bat coronavirus that looked a lot similar to COVID-19. What you learn as you sort of dig into the nature of what happened in Wuhan, but lab accidents more broadly, is that these are actually more common than we realize. And so part of the push for accountability is based on the idea that the risks of a pandemic like the one we went through with COVID-19, or with one that could be far worse if a future virus were just as pathogenic or more lethal, rather, those risks have not gone down. We haven't learned any lessons. And so we need accountability on a year timeline, not a 20-year timeline, which is why I was very glad to see that President Trump launched his website. I would encourage all Americans to go to the website right now and really lays out 5 basic common sense truths that the government heretofore has not acknowledged. 1, the virus possessed biological characteristics that you couldn't find in nature. 2, all the data suggests it stemmed from a single introduction into humans, not multiple spillovers like previous pandemics. 3, that the Wuhan Institute had conducted gain-of-function research at inadequate safety levels. 4, that the researchers at the Wuhan Institute fell ill with COVID months before the virus was allegedly discovered at a wet market. And finally, after all these years, there's no scientific evidence of a natural origin that has surfaced. That alone has done more to advance the case of accountability than under 4 years of President Joe Biden. So we need to press the gas. We need to hold our own agencies accountable. And again, we need to declassify all the relevant information.
Mike, I wanted to pivot a little bit here and lean into another area of expertise, something you're dealing with day in and day out now as head of defense at Palantir Technologies. I think one of the lessons that anybody paying attention to what's going on over in Ukraine with Russia, and especially if they're looking ahead at the possibility at some point in the future of some kind of hot conflict with China, is technology is going to be absolutely critical. We're looking at drones. We're looking at a future of telecommunications and high-speed computing, making decisions on the battlefield that is truly the stuff of sci-fi from not long ago, and it's becoming reality now every day. With that said, I know Palantir is involved in the high-tech edge of things with defense. It wasn't long ago where Google was upset. There was like an uprising at Google over the prospect of doing anything that helped the United States Pentagon, right? Like as if Silicon Valley was its own little fiefdom that did not actually become or was not actually a part of the United States. Do you feel like that is changing now? Do you feel like there's an understanding that companies that are U.S. based, that employ Americans, have a role in defense, and that means that they should take a patriotic position on, yeah, we will work with the United States Pentagon?
I think it is changing. I mean, Google has actually recently changed its position. And if you remember at the time, the reason so many of us got upset when Google abandoned Project Maven is they were simultaneously trying to
Working with
open
China?
an AI, exactly, an AI center in Beijing. It was subsequently revealed there was a project that they did abandon, but a project they were exploring to censor internet search in China. So the message was, well, we're cool working with a genocidal communist regime, but not with the American military, because the American military occasionally has to do things like kill Salafi jihadists in order to keep America safe. And so into the breach stepped Palantir, which was unapologetic in its belief that America is the greatest country in the history of the world, that we should have the most lethal military in the world, and that some folks, be they terrorists or other bad guys, need to be killed occasionally. And I do think what we're seeing on the battlefield in Ukraine is forcing people to re-examine their previously held assumptions. There's a lot of capital in the venture capital community that is trying to flow into defense technology companies. And finally, I would say, not to talk my own book, but when you have a company like Palantir that spent 2 decades trying to survive the so-called valley of death, because it isn't easy for a defense technology company to succeed, because the Pentagon can be a difficult customer, it proves to other companies that are trying to do the same that it's possible to survive, it's possible to go public, it's possible to have a mission-focused company and that also is successful financially, which is why we founded something called the First Breakfast Initiative, which is designed to make it easier for non-traditional defense technology companies to survive and thrive, because we need more, right? We can't just have 5 primes that control everything. We need the primes to survive. They're always going to be there, but we need a more diverse ecosystem of defense technology companies if we are going to have a hope of deterring China from invading Taiwan, as well as simultaneously going after terrorists in the Middle East and the other threat actors we have to deal with.
What you just said, I think, is important. It also, to me, connects with your editorial in the Wall Street Journal, which is about the importance of truth and the commitment to fact. When you see so much of what's going on in America today and around the world, whether it's celebrating the United Healthcare CEO's killer, whether it is down in Frisco, Texas, Carmelo Anthony stabs a 17-year-old in the heart and raises $400,000. As you just mentioned, so many of these elite institutions out there had people marching in favor of the perpetrators of October 7th. Why are we having such a difference? This is a big philosophical question, but why do you think we're having such a challenge, especially going into the Holy Week, of good and evil, recognizing them and being willing to stand on the side of good?
Well, I do think, to really make it biblical and maybe betray my Catholic perspective, I do think as religion has retreated in terms of its role in American life, people have sought out other gods, and in some ways, politics or a political tribe can become a cult and fill kind of a God-shaped hole in people's hearts. And I think correspondingly, there's also this epistemological crisis that we have in America where people no longer trust any source of information, right? Like we have this very balkanized media landscape where nobody really knows where to go to get truth. And the risk of that is people can kind of opt in to whatever reality they just want to live in. And it's very hard to have a coherent conversation based on facts, based on logic as a result. That being said, as a product of representing Northeast Wisconsin, where we're going to host the NFL draft here shortly, by the way, everybody.
I will be watching.
All right.
Trust me.
I'm very excited.
It's a huge, huge thing for Green Bay, Wisconsin. Huge thing. I think most people are just common sense, right? There was this revolution of common sense that President Trump talked about. I mean, people were afraid initially to speak their minds, particularly in COVID, but people started to see what was happening to our kids with schools being shut down, what was being happened to our loved ones who were being locked up, and they thought this doesn't make any sense. So I do have this abiding faith in the common sense of the American people. Right now, they're demanding change and reform in the basic institutions of government. I think Trump is an instrument for that change. It can be very disruptive at times, but that's what the American people want. And so we have to get back to that. And at the end of the day, we have to realize, of course, America's not perfect, but we're the good guys, right? We are the greatest country in human history. That comes with a great responsibility. But the rest of the world is looking to us for leadership, to lead with courage. If you remember when China took over Hong Kong and hundreds of thousands of people came out into the streets to protest, what were they waving? They were waving American flags, right? They were looking to us as an example for a free society, and that's something we all have a duty to maintain.
Well said. Have a good Holy Week and weekend, and we'll talk to you again hopefully soon. Encourage people to go check out that editorial in the Wall Street Journal.
Thanks, guys.
It's Mike Gallagher now inside of Defense Universe, but previously Green Bay, Wisconsin congressman, and yes, the NFL draft coming up soon. And he just talked about good and evil, Holy Week. This should be a joyous time throughout Israel between the Passover and Easter holidays. Not the case this year because there is a constant reminder missile attacks can occur at any given moment. That's why we're happy and proud and honored to partner with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews to help provide life-saving aid and security essentials to so many people in the Holy Land. Your urgently needed gift today will go towards things like bomb shelters, flak jackets, bulletproof vests. You'll also help first responders with armored security vehicles, ambulances, more. I saw up close the difference your gifts make. Join us in standing with Israel. Call to make your gift at 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-4325. You can also go online at supportifcj.org to give. That website, supportifcj.org.